Get ready for an epic adventure with a unique twist. Meet Rakuro, a boy passionate about games, but not just any game. He loves the most troublesome ones, full of bugs and glitches. The more imperfect, the better. However, everything changes when he visits a game store and is advised to try something new, a divine game where perfection reigns and bugs have no place. Rakuro decides to embark on this new adventure, but in a risky way. He chooses the weakest class and sells all his equipment, focusing only on his weapon. Now, a single strike is enough to take him out of the game. That's what we'll see today. Without further ado, let's move on to the recap. The anime begins by showing us the completion of a game. Rakuro finally manages to complete one of the worst games he's ever played, but unexpectedly, Rakuro delivers a flying kick to Furia's face. A girl who, in theory, should be the heroine of the game, but soon you'll see that it wasn't quite like that. After doing this, Rakuro is excited to have finished that game and to get back at the troublesome girl. And at this moment, we have a brief explanation about the reality of this anime. It is shown that Rakuro lives in a world where screen games are considered retro, and immersive virtual reality games are the most common. Among the many games released, there are those where the design and graphics aren't that good, and these games also have many bugs, which pushes most players away. However, there are those who are especially drawn to this kind of problematic game, and these people are known as perverts or weirdos. And Hakuro Hizutome, the protagonist of this story, is one of those people. We see that he is quite relieved to have finished the last game, and he quickly begins to think about what bad game he will play next. After that, Rakuro goes to school. While walking through the hallway, we see a girl getting ready to talk to him. She even practices her lines, but when she gains the courage to approach him, one of Rakuro's friends appears and completely interrupts her. Then, this girl goes to a game store, and the store owner says it's a shame that Rakuro didn't come today. The girl, embarrassed, says she just came to look for some games. But the woman says she can't hide that she likes him. And after a while, Rakuro arrives, asking the owner if she has any good bad game for him. In his head, this makes sense, but when he appears, the girl hides quickly, leaving Mana, the store owner, very confused. She asks Rakuro if he managed to complete the game he was playing, and Rakuro happily says yes. And enthusiastically, he begins to explain how bad the game was. Full of bugs, bad story, and the protagonist always ended up ruining his journey. To him, she was the real villain of the story. But he says it was really satisfying to finish it, because after defeating the final boss, he has a 3-minute window where he can finally beat her without worrying about the game's progress being interrupted. And that's what he did. Rakuro made sure to beat her as much as he could, and it really relieved the stress he went through with her by his side. After that, Rakuro says he doesn't know what to play anymore, and Mana recommends him the new most played game in the world, Shangri-La Frontier, a divine game with over 30 million players and practically no bugs. Rakuro resists, since, for him, the really good games are the bad ones, but he ends up giving the game a chance. When he gets home, he starts studying a bit about the game and finally decides to log in and create his character. In the class choice, he chooses to be a mercenary with 2 daggers. And as a natural choice, he chooses to be a wanderer. After spending some time customizing his character, the result is this. Yes, a guy with a bird mask and shorts. No, he's not a pervert. I can explain why he's like that. Rakuro decided to sell all his armor so that he can focus on getting a good weapon from the start. Without armor and almost naked, he decides to wear a mask since, for him, it's too embarrassing for people to see his face while dressed like that. And after that, he chooses his nickname, and in the game, he will be called Sunraku, the name he always uses in all games. After that, he finally enters the game. Rakuro starts testing the game's movement and finds it amazingly well made. According to him, the previous game didn't even compare to what he can do here. Next, Rakuro takes a look at the map and sees that he is near the initial city. But since he chose the Wanderer class, he starts his journey in the forest. Ideally, he should head towards the city, but he is attacked by a goblin while heading there. Rakuro gets excited and starts hunting monsters to gain experience and get stronger. He notes that the battle system depends a lot on the player's skill, which benefits him a lot since he trained a lot having to overcome games with bad controls and endless bugs. Now, in a divine game, he is more than prepared. Rakuro continues in the forest facing monsters, until he encounters a rabbit that is fast and strong, nearly cutting his neck off. The monster's name is Vorpal Rabbit, and it attacks Rakuro, being extremely strong and scaring our protagonist. Rakuro manages to land an attack, but the rabbit is still alive and doesn't seem weakened. Rakuro then realizes that he needs to land a critical hit on the rabbit, and he quickly cuts the big rabbit's neck. After defeating it, Rakuro notices that the colossal rabbit didn't drop its weapons. This saddens him because he really wanted those daggers the rabbit was using. Rakuro then starts getting excited, seeing the various ways he can fight, and begins to think of different fighting combinations. After that, he continues hunting monsters in hopes of finding more rabbits to get those daggers to drop. As the Vorpal rabbit is a rare monster, it took Rakuro more than 2 hours to finally get a set of daggers, but now he can finally head to the city. Rakuro checks the map and realizes he has strayed far from the first city, being much closer to Secondale, the second city. Rakuro notes that to get there, he must cross a bridge and proceeds to do so. What he doesn't know is that when he reaches the bridge, he will encounter a huge snake. Rakuro then realizes that this will be the first boss he should defeat. The problem is that Rakuro has no armor, and he hasn't even passed through the first city to gather resources and people to form a group, as that snake is usually defeated by a group of players. But Rakuro has no idea about this and decides to face the snake alone. Rakuro prepares himself and attacks it enthusiastically, but before he starts attacking, the anime shows us a strange person with armor that seems to be strong in the first city. This person is Rei, the girl who likes him. She is looking for him so that she can help him and perhaps finally get closer to the eccentric boy. Unfortunately for her, he is already heading to the second city. Well, back to the gigantic snake, and Rakuro attacks it. He seems to be having a lot of fun. Rakuro dodges its attacks and realizes the snake is really strong. At some point, he manages to land a hit on it, but contrary to what he thought, it doesn't deal any damage. On the contrary, his initial daggers are destroyed in this attack. Rakuro is forced to use the Vorpal rabbit's dagger, and when he was about to land another blow on the snake, it catches him off guard. The snake spits venom on him, and being poisoned, he suffers 1 damage every 10 seconds. Rakuro has 30 HP, so he has just under 5 minutes to defeat the snake and find a checkpoint to save his progress. But he doesn't lose hope. He says that the bad games he played are much harder than this and immediately attacks the snake. While fighting, Rakuro realizes that it's not easy to hit its head, which is probably its weak point. So he decides to deliver repeated attacks in one spot to create a weak point. But even that doesn't work. It throws him up and grabs him with its mouth. Rakuro's end seems certain at this point. However, he manages to prevent being swallowed and jumps out of the snake's mouth. Then, he lands a hit on its head and grabs onto the snake's hair. Yes, the snake has hair. At this moment, he uses an ability called Screw Pierce and hits the snake's eye, finally defeating it. After eliminating it, he is very happy and starts to look at the drops and stats he received. But he realizes it's not the time for that, as his life is quickly descending, leaving him with only 9 HP. Rakuro quickly allocates all his points into stamina so that he can run to the city, and he does. At the city gate, we see a girl and a boy. We see that he is teaching her how to start in the game. While they were talking, the girl spots Rakuro coming really fast, and based on his mask, she imagines him to be a monster and prepares to attack him. But her friend stops her since he has a name above his head, indicating he is a player. If she attacks him, she will become PK, and a skull will appear in front of her name, which is very bad. The guy assumes that Rakuro is poisoned by the snake, as this often happened early in the game, and quickly guides him on how to get to the inn, where Rakuro can save his game before dying. Rakuro arrives there, and the receptionist takes forever to explain how it works. Desperate, Rakuro tells her to shut up and just give him any available room, which she does. With only 1 HP left, Rakuro finally manages to save his game and immediately dies. Next, he continues exploring the city. He needs a map, some healing items, and new equipment because walking around the city that way is kind of embarrassing. Everyone is staring and commenting about him. Rakuro quickly buys a blade-proof armor and is happy with it since now they won't see him as a pervert. Then, he goes to a weapon shop to try to sell the goblin axe he picked up, but unfortunately, it's worthless, and it would be better to throw it away. Rakuro asks to see the weapons the shopkeeper has, but none are as good as the Vorpal rabbit daggers he has. The shop owner says of course, as those daggers are very rare, and if he wants something better, he should make it himself. The blacksmith says that if he gathers the materials, he can make stronger weapons for him. Rakuro is excited about the idea and quickly goes to the difficulty swamp to get the necessary materials by mining the rocks. Rakuro mines a lot and realizes that he can only find common stones. The ore he needs is rare, so he will spend a lot of time there. After about 30 minutes, Rakuro has only managed to get 2 ores and becomes frustrated. In addition, the swamp mud slows down his movement significantly, and it's becoming annoying. He continues mining until a frog appears and jumps near him, splattering him with mud and completely exhausting Rakuro's patience. He gets really angry and starts beating the poor frog until it retreats. He notices that upon killing it, the creature dropped its skin, which is the same material from which Rakuro's armor is made. Rakuro realizes that there are new players nearby and decides to focus on mining before the place gets crowded. After a few hours, he returns to the blacksmith, and the blacksmith is surprised by the amount of ore Rakuro has obtained. The blacksmith then shows the weapon he can craft with that. Rakuro gets really excited, as the weapon looks cool and seems to be quite powerful. While the blacksmith crafts the weapon, Rakuro takes a look at other shops and buys some items. Eventually, he returns to the blacksmith, and his daggers are ready. He is very happy with them, as their durability is much higher than weapons dropped by monsters. The blacksmith also mentions that he can craft better weapons if he obtains new materials, and he can also upgrade his weapons with the blacksmith. The blacksmith also warns him not to leave the city now with those clothes, and Rakuro asks why. The blacksmith explains that it's already dark, and night monsters are very dangerous and aggressive. But as expected, Rakuro doesn't listen, and he quickly goes out to test his new weapons. Meanwhile, the girl is looking for him, heading towards the second city, and remember that snake that almost killed Rakuro? Well, with just one attack, she defeated it. Here, we see that she is extremely strong. Back to Rakuro, he is battling against a night goblin. However, this night goblin is much stronger than the first one he faced. It is resilient and learns to deal with Rakuro's attacks, making it difficult to be defeated. They fight for quite a while until the goblin calls many others to attack Rakuro, which surprises him, as this ability is usually used by weaker monsters. Now, Rakuro is surrounded by hat-wearing goblins and finds himself in a complicated situation. He decides to advance and attack them all, but when he's about to strike, a large amount of power appears and defeats all the goblins. The author of this is a giant wolf, now targeting Rakuro. It is a unique monster called Lycaon, the Night Assailant. It appears to be extremely strong, and it doesn't make sense to appear to a newbie like Rakuro. After this, we go to the servers where the game is hosted, and we see that this is the first unique monster to appear, and no one has ever spotted it before. Will Rakuro be able to defeat it? We see here that girl still searching for Rakuro. She meets some players who inform her they saw him. He was half naked and wearing a bird mask. The girl is impressed since he faced the big snake without visiting the first city and confronted it without even having a group. After gathering information, she quickly heads to Secondly. And now, we have a brief explanation of the situation in that game. It has a unique monster system, with incredibly strong monsters that are very rare to encounter. Lycaon, that giant wolf Rakuro encountered earlier, is one of these monsters. We're told that even with over 30 million players, none have managed to defeat any of these unique monsters, suggesting they're very challenging. And at this moment, we switch to Rakuro. He's face to face with Lycaon, the night attacker. Boy, until now, he's been having fun fighting monsters, but I bet he's hesitating with this one. Rakuro remembers being alone against those goblins that were already quite strong. At this moment, the big monster attacks Rakuro. Fortunately, he manages to react in time and tries to counterattack. However, without success, he doesn't inflict any damage on the wolf. Seeing how strong the monster is, Rakuro starts to curse and laughs. He gets quite nervous and thanks God for spending the night training. If he hadn't learned the blocking skill, he'd be in trouble right now. Rakuro realizes that one small slip and he could be in big trouble, so he starts taking the fight seriously. Until at one point, he manages to land a critical blow on the monster's paw. But as expected, it doesn't cause any damage. After that, the monster simply becomes invisible, and Rakuro is at its mercy, not knowing where it might strike from. Just before it attacks him, Rakuro senses its presence behind him and manages to react. He keeps attacking the monster, but without causing much damage. Lycaon disappears again, and Rakuro prepares to anticipate where it might appear next. He looks around, on guard, until suddenly the monster appears out of nowhere and tries to bite our protagonist. The wolf comes charging, trying all sorts of attacks. By now, Rakuro's sweating bullets, doing everything to avoid the wolf strikes. He notices he's been attacked for 5 minutes, yet it seems he hasn't suffered any damage, and his Volpei daggers are getting quite worn out. Rakuro starts to think that maybe this creature isn't an opponent he can defeat right now, but he's a maniac, excited to fight the wolf. Rakuro goes at it, attempting a combined attack on the monster. He keeps attacking frantically, thinking that hitting its eye would lead to victory. Unfortunately for Rakuro, that's not how it goes. Lycaon's eye is as tough as the rest of its body, and Rakuro's attack inflicts no damage. At this point, the wolf decides to fight seriously, and now Rakuro is in trouble. Lycaon howls and swiftly attacks Rakuro, cutting the legs of our protagonist at an incredible speed. The boy doesn't understand a thing. He's in shock and asks how he was hit since he couldn't see anything due to the monster's speed. Rakuro falls to the ground, and the wolf approaches him. He starts to think that this is how a game should be. He won't learn an incredible skill out of nowhere or be the target of some high-level mysterious player. He really needs to improve and get stronger. Despite the critical situation, even after taking that powerful attack that took his legs away, he's still hanging in there with 1 HP. At this moment, he talks to the wolf, acknowledging its strength, but this whole absurdity is the result of a well-made programming, and it's as strong as its creators wanted it to be. That means somehow it's possible to defeat it, and even knowing he will die, Rakuro is excited to get stronger and meet it again for a rematch. Finally, he receives the fatal blow and goes back to base. Rakuro returns to the respawn point but notices his body is covered in marks. He opens the buffs and debuffs interface and notices he's under a curse called Lycaon's Curse. The effects are as follows. Equipment cannot be placed on the body part affected by the curse, monsters with a lower level than the affected character will flee, conversations with NPCs will be affected by the presence of the mark, and the affected body part gains resistance to magical effects. This curse can only be removed through the prayers of a saint or by defeating the one who cast the curse. Rakuro gets a bit pensive and it takes a while for him to realize how much trouble he's in. He becomes desperate and starts cursing the wolf. Afterward, he takes a stroll around the city, and since he can't wear any armor, he goes back to his starting outfit. Well, almost an outfit, he's only wearing a mask and shorts. Obviously, all the players think he's some weird pervert. To avoid the stares, Rakuro ducks into an alley to check his stats. He notices that while fighting Lycaon, despite losing, he gained a considerable amount of experience. He's already reached level 28. He has many attribute points to distribute and ends up focusing on agility and attack. Since without armor, investing in HP doesn't make sense as he'll go down with a single attack. That leaves him quite desperate. While lamenting, a Vorpal rabbit jumps onto his head and signals him to follow. Rakuro realizes this isn't an ordinary Vorpal rabbit, it's dressed and seems intelligent. He decides to follow it to see what it's about. The rabbit is quite fast, but Rakuro manages to keep up. Rakuro becomes very excited, thinking this might be a special event in the game. Until, at one point, they reach a dead-end alley, but just when he thought he'd catch the rabbit, the crafty thing summons a door in the wall and goes through it. On the door, it says, "Unique scenario, invitation from the rabbit country." At this moment, Rakuro starts pondering what that might be and remembers reading about it while studying the game. He opens the door and enters the said unique scenario. He's thrilled to encounter it so soon. Upon entering, he realizes it's indeed a world of rabbits and is amazed by everything there. While observing the scenery, that rabbit he was chasing appears behind him. It welcomes Rakuro and says it was eager to meet him. Rakuro doesn't understand a thing and is very startled to see the creature talk. The rabbit, all excited, mentions that everyone in Rabbits is thrilled to meet him, because despite being weak, he had the courage to face the night attacker alone, and the skill he had in continuing to land perfect deadly blows without taking a single hit was incredible. It says that's the embodiment of the Vorpal soul. Rakuro says that even though the rabbit says that, he couldn't even scratch Lycaon. And the rabbit says it's obvious since Lycaon is very strong. The crazy rabbit mentions that Lycaon is one of the most powerful monsters and snacks on Afternoon Dragon. It also says that these marks on Rakuro's body mean that Lycaon didn't see him just as prey, they're proof that he recognized him as an individual. And that's incredible. While the rabbit spoke all this, Rakuro could only think that a monster was talking in front of him. Finally, it concludes by saying that due to Rakuro's great feats, the chief of the Vorpal Rabbits wants to speak with him. That's why the chief sent it to find Rakuro. Rakuro hopes it's not revenge for all the Vorpal Rabbits he killed. At this moment, the rabbit introduces itself as Emuru and tells him to follow. Rakuro does as asked until they reach the place where the chief of the rabbits stays. Emuru says that some have come to rabbits, but Rakuro is the first to visit the palace. Rakuro is excited to know that it will be a unique scenario that only he will experience. Finally, he arrives in front of the chief. Emuru says he brought the human the chief wanted to meet. Upon seeing him, Rakuro is completely frightened. Well, who wouldn't be, looking at the size of that big rabbit? And it looks like a mobster with its giant cigar. The rabbit asks if he's the one who got beaten by the giant dog, and Rakuro just confirms it. The big rabbit says it was surprised to see that he has talent, unlike the others who received the Vorpal soul. Rakuro isn't understanding a thing, and the rabbit asks him if he can spare some time. It says its name is Visake, the chief of rabbits and all the Vorpal rabbits. And it asks if he really fought with Lycaon. Rakuro confirms, and the rabbit says that he indeed has a great Vorpal soul. Rakuro has no idea what this Vorpal soul is and continues paralyzed in front of the chief. Until, at one point, Visake says he'd be happy to train him if he wants. Rakuro finds it a bit strange but eventually understands. To him, it's a training mission, and that world is a unique scenario with overpowering benefits. Without hesitation, he bows graciously and willingly accepts the training, wrapping it up by calling him Mano. The rabbit stands up and asks why Mano. Rakuro is completely intimidated and says it was just a joke as the rabbit slowly approaches him. As the rabbit reaches out a hand toward Rakuro, the boy thinks it's the end. But luckily, the rabbit likes it and starts smiling, embracing Rakuro. It says it really liked Rakuro and, by asking for his training, makes Rakuro its little brother. Now Rakuro feels relieved, and the rabbit says he can call it Vash. Next, the big rabbit calls Emuru, saying he trusts him to take care of Rakuro. The little bunny is very happy and says he'll do his best. After that, Emuru says he'll show Rakuro the palace. But Rakuro says he's been playing for a long time and needs to rest. Emuru says if that's the case, he'll show him a bed so he can save his spawn point there. As Vash was leaving, he says he forgot something, grabs a collar, and throws it at Rakuro. The item's name is Vorpal Soul Collar, and it cannot be removed. When equipped, the user receives half the experience points but gains 2.5 times more status points when leveling up. The big rabbit only mentions that he can remove it if he wants. He adds that extraordinary difficulties are necessary for the weak to become stronger. At that moment, Rakuro leaves the game and sees that it wasn't so bad. Even though he gets less XP, he still gains many attributes, making it worth it. He checks a few forums and realizes he is indeed the first to encounter Visake, the chief of the Vorpal Rabbits, which gets him really excited. After that, to relax a bit, Rakuro decides to enter a fighting game he used to play a lot. He meets an old friend and decides to fight him to reminisce about old times. After this friend uses some bugs to perform a weird ability, Rakuro also exploits a bug to deliver very fast punches. They fight hard until Rakuro is hit and defeated. He mentions he's a bit rusty since he's only been fighting NPCs. After that, he talks with his friend about his fight against Lycaon. He says he's very excited about defeating the wolf. After chatting for a while with his friend, we're shown a girl. She receives a message informing her that Rakuro is playing Shangui La Frontier. And pay attention to her, she will cause some problems for our protagonist in the other game soon. After that, Rakuro returns to Shangri-La and walks around the city with Emuru. Emuru says there are still many places for him to visit in Rabbits. Rakuro says he's interested in the palace, and he really wants to see everything. But first, he'd like to reach the third city before it gets crowded since it's vacation time, and many people will be playing, filling up all the initial areas. Emuru says if that's the case, he'll help him reach the next city. Now Rakuro and Emuru are in a group, almost like he has a pet now. Rakuro puts Emuru on his shoulder and walks around the city with him. At this moment, two girls stop him and become completely enamored with the cuteness of the rabbit. They get very excited and ask how he got one and are even more amazed because it talks, something they've never heard of. Rakuro sees the situation getting complicated and runs away. But before he leaves, the girls take a photo of him with Imuru, and that photo will cause quite a stir in the game. Rakuro will be in trouble because of it, but we'll see about that later. Now Rakuro runs out of the city and heads toward the third city. As they journey on, Rakuro decides to test if Lycaon's curse really works as written. He tests if monsters with lower levels than him actually flee, and indeed, he finds that this effect really works. They head to the third city but come across a swamp. Just like back when he was mining, in this swamp, the player's speed is reduced, and he becomes very slow. And remember when Rakuro had to face a big snake to get to the second city? Well, to reach the third, he'll have to face this big guy. Its name is Mud Digger. Rakuro is anxious and unsure if he'll be able to handle this big one. Will he defeat it? We'll find out in the next episode. Did you like it? Well, my friend, leave that like and subscribe, give me that support, and to reward you for that, I left a little gift here at the end. An amazing video that tells the story of Fate, a boy born with useless abilities, always treated like trash because of it. But one day, his real powers awakened, and he became very overpowered, and now he's beating everyone up. Man, it's incredible. Click on the screen and check it out, okay? Until next time, see ya.